So Terry, as a marketing expert, was there anything about the Airstream brand in particular that spoke to you?
You know, that's a good question because I've always loved Airstream trailers, just the aesthetic of them, the aluminum, the roundness of them. I always admired them. I'm not a trailer guy. Like I don't, you know, I wouldn't go vacationing in a trailer. That wasn't my thing, but I always loved them aesthetically. And I did a story on them in one of my episodes talking about how they started in the 30s with Wally Byam. And I was fascinated that there were, I think in that era, there were 400 trailer companies, and this is the only trailer company that has survived since the Depression, which I thought was amazing. And I read another stat that something like over 70% of Airstreams are still on the road from the 30s, and I thought that is an amazing story, right? This is the funny part of it. We lived in Creemore, Ontario at that time, and I would have to drive into Toronto every once a week to record my radio show, and it was a 4-hour proposition, 2 hours each way, in inching traffic. Just terrible. Just it was killing me, and I did it for, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years.
Oh!
And my wife said to me one morning, I was complaining about the drive, it was killing me, and she said, "Could you create a studio inside an Airstream trailer?" And honest to God, in that moment, it was like an epiphany. I went, yes, that's possible. And I thought I would have to go to the States, by the way. Because I didn't really see a lot of Airstreams around Ontario. But then I was just searching want ads online, and I found one in Cambridge, Ontario, which wasn't too far from Creemore. I couldn't believe that there was one for sale that close. My wife and I went to see it, and I made him an offer right on the spot. As soon as I looked at it, I said, I'll take it, and then eventually trailered it home, and then began the whole process of turning it into a recording studio.
And was towing new to you at that point, or had you already had experience with that?
I had never towed a trailer in my life before. Okay, so let me back up. This is the best part of this story, I think. I had to find somebody who could restore an Airstream trailer, so someone who had that expertise. But I also needed to find somebody who could create a recording studio inside an Airstream trailer. So I thought those would be two different companies, two different entities.
Right.
So I was doing spending lots of time online trying to find somebody that could do each of those tasks. And then I find somebody who does both. And he restores Airstreams, and he creates Airstreams for Hollywood studios. They have, editing facilities inside Airstreams, and he created Airstreams for celebrities, so when they go on location, he already had a sense of what a studio is. And I was scrolling, and his site was beautiful. His work was extraordinary. It was so tasteful and beautiful. And I'm scrolling down wondering, where in California are you? And I get to the bottom of the contact me, and he's in Nova Scotia. And I can't believe it. So I call, his name was Craig Dorsey, he is Craig Dorsey. I called him up and I said, have you ever created a radio studio inside an Airstream trailer? And he said, no, but I would love to. So we hired Craig, and Tyson, this is the best part. Then I had to trailer it out to Nova Scotia, and that was really the first time I'd ever really done a hardcore pull of a trailer onto a ferry to Digby, to Clementsville.
I restored my first two for myself, and then somebody said, I love what you're doing. Will you do one for me? And I said, well, sure, but I got to go to work. So it'll be weekends and nights. And he says, I'm in no hurry. So I restored this my first trailer for a client, and then I posted that on my website, which was just a camaraderie site, right? Posting pictures and brochures and stuff. And as soon as I posted this picture, somebody else said, I didn't know you were doing restorations. Will you do one for me? And so it kind of just took off from there. I was an art director doing television commercials at the time, and I just said, I'm done. And kind of just left the industry and went off and started restoring trailers, and I've been doing it ever since.
Craig, you're originally from California. What brought you to Nova Scotia?
It's as if we were made of metal and there was a giant magnet here.
Really?
We were just drawn here. My wife and I had been searching to, we wanted to get our kids out of Southern California. We saw the movie on Golden Pond years ago, and just, rocks and trees and water and the little cabin, and they had wooden boats, so I was seeing trailers. So we started looking around, and then Nova Scotia, I I actually looked at feeding my obsession on eBay, and I looked at a vintage trailer postcard from the 1940s, and where it said item location, it said beautiful Nova Scotia. And when I read that, it was like the angels sang.
As we got into it too, Craig realized that the chassis really needed to be changed. Like, and you don't really know that until you take an Airstream apart. So by the time I got the Airstream back from Craig, it was really like a brand new 1969 Airstream trailer, because everything had changed. The wheels, the tires, the chassis. He had replaced some of the panels that had dents in them outside, and then redid this whole beautiful, wonderfully creative space in here that I love being in.
The trailer that he bought, we were both looking, and he found that trailer, and the pictures of it were incredible. It was a time warp. And it was a wonderful trailer. It was a great year for Airstream. A beautiful floral fabric and the wallpaper that was in there, that vinyl wallpaper. But everything was in prime condition. So we looked at it and thought, this is incredible, but we don't need any of this. We're going to gut it. But when we took it apart, I started finding damage, and it turns out that the entire chassis, I believe that there was a period that Airstream put spray foam insulation underneath in the factory, and somehow that absorbed moisture and just retained it and rotted the chassis. So we had no idea when he bought it, but it was a body off, drag the chassis out, build a completely new chassis, and then pretty much start from scratch. So had a new axle, so basically it was the shell.
Think of what he had to do here. He had to restore the outside, so it was this gleaming, beautiful Airstream. And then he had to, inside here, create a studio that was more or less soundproof for me. So when I look at your beautiful Airstream, there can't be any metal surfaces inside here. It all has to be soft, so all the walls are soft, right? Because as you record, you got sounds bouncing off hard surfaces, you're in trouble. So he had to figure that out. I actually hired an acoustician, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, to actually figure out how to insulate this and what materials to use to make it as soundproof as possible.
What is it about the vintage trailers that really gets you?
Beaver cleaver syndrome.
Okay.
It captures a piece of that Americana, Canadiana, history, that post-World War II image that was portrayed. It's just, for me, it's natural materials that you don't find in new RVs. The woods, the linoleums that were clean materials, and just the feel, the aura of the energy that was in these old trailers. It just, I don't know. I love it.
When Craig and I were first talking about doing this trailer, he said, tell me about you. Like, what do you like? What do you do when you're not doing your radio show? What are your passions? And I said to him, well, I'm a huge Beatles fan. I love vintage things. I own a vintage automobile. I collect a lot of vintage things. And so he picked up on that. So what he did in here was all the toggle switches for lighting, for example, are old school toggle switches like you would find on a 1960s guitar amplifier. And this beautiful drawers here, and underneath is the battery and everything that he made out of Fender amplifier cloth, even with the Fender logo on it. There's two microphones, old style microphones that he turned into lights.
I have to reinvent the wheel many times. I'll buy something and I don't like the covering, the box it comes in or something, so I just redesign it. Keep the components of whatever this thing is, but make it look vintage, and then slip it in. So kind of like in the hot rod world, you've got a sleeper. It just, an original looking car on the outside, but a blown engine under the hood, right? And that's what these trailers are a lot of times. You walk into them and it has the feel, the aura of age and the energy of the olden days, but all the new highfalutin stuff buried where you won't see it. Right now, most of the trailers that I'm doing, probably 4 months, but I've spent, you mentioned the Marie Antoinette trailer, that was 2 years of work.
So,
Not
shower?
40 hours a week, but yeah, the bathroom alone I had months into.
This is an interesting structure.
It is. It's called a Gothic arch shed. So the arches, the separate arches, I set up a jig on a table. I figured out how far you can bend wet wood without snapping, and then set up a jig and made 20 of those, and then put the two together, with the cap on it to create like a wishbone shape. And so it's all made out of 1x3s and 2x3 blocks. It's a very simple, very stout structure. And it's a greenhouse. But the nice thing is there's 3 doors here that open, so I can get a large trailer into it.
Well, it's just such a different back on it.
That's the front.
I was like,
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
you could see the
I
tongue.
didn't see the hitch down there. It's got a different edge on it.
Yeah, is that ever interesting?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very plain trailer, but it's actually I cut a hole in it yesterday to put an air conditioner on, and this is a well-built trailer. Just looking at the it's all done by hand, right? And the fact that there's no gaps when wood is set in, and whoever built this did a great job. A Roycraft, a 1955 Roycraft. Here, let's step inside. Take a look.
Look at the light by the door there.
Oh, wow.
We've seen some of the attention and detail that you put into your builds. How do you come up with some of these unique touches that you put on each of the trailers?
I have no idea. It was just when they made me, it was that last little scoop they threw in. It's something that I've drawn on since I was a child, being able to create things. Even in this trailer, I'll bring a chair in and sit in it and just kind of look around and take it in. And just imagine myself sitting in the finished product. And I go off that vision. What was that? What did I see? How do I make that work? But I walked in here and I just felt the space. It's very square. It's got a few simple little details. If you look back at the cupboard door in the back, you can see that the doorknob is in the middle of the door. So I'm kind of going with that style and running with it. If you look behind you, you can see that this had some brick. You find a lot of oddball things in these over the years, right? And so this had a brick veneer glued on, and I tore that apart. And this will be the focal part. The focal point of the trailer is kind of the backsplash of the kitchen. It's the first bright thing you see when you step in. So I've amassed quite a collection of textures and forms and surfaces, all vintage new old stock going back to the 1930s. Been collecting my whole life. And so I've got vintage plastic tiles that I'm putting up there. And they actually use those in trailers for years. So using that as kind of the starting point and then flowing with it. I'll take those colors. It's getting a new floor. I love this floor, but it's a lot of water damage on it. So we'll put a new one over it, a linoleum floor that has the same black and yellow colors. I cut this hole yesterday for an air conditioner, and looking at the wood, it's old growth, and it's just beautiful, the grain in it. When you get stuff today, it's very wide, fast growth. They're cutting down 15-year trees. This is old.
Wow.
I can't say enough about Craig. His attention to detail is so amazing to me. And if you look on his website, if you Google him and see some of the trailers he's done, they look like mansions inside. I mean, his ability to work in a confined space is extraordinary.
He's an artist. He's truly an artist.
He's an artist.
But do you miss the flower print material?
That was here originally? No. And that's the other thing, too. We had to rip out the washroom and the kitchen because I didn't want anything like that. There's nothing in here now. It's just one recording studio. My wife, Debbie, who produces our show, sits at the table that's right in front of me, and I sit back there and record. And the whole space is a recording space. So there's no water in here, no washroom, no taps, nothing. That's the other thing, too. another interesting obstacle we had to overcome is our radio show is a January to June show, so most of our recordings over the winter. So we had to figure out how to heat this place. So there's 3 sources of heat in here. I have just a regular heater that blows air. I have a convection heater beside me, which is a little quieter. And then I have in-floor heating too. So that keeps this place really toasty right through the winter. And we have air conditioning in the summer.
So you're acquiring a few different long-term projects here?
Yeah, I'm always on the hunt whenever I can find something. And, as you know, there aren't that many here to pick from. So when I do find them, I gather them and stockpile them.
Holy! Wow!
So back here, I've got a 1952 Spartan mansion, and I think that's about 30 feet long. Behind it is a 1946 Spartan Manor. That was the first year of production for the company. This one right here is very rare, 1930s. We're guessing it's a Hollywood movie star dressing trailer, the way that it's built. And this trailer would cost $1 million to have built today. The detail, it's all French marquetry. It's just beautiful, but it's packaged up right now. Beyond that is a 1947 Westwood Tahoe, 19 feet, a 61, I believe, Avion, and then the other side is another Spartan mansion. These were built by J. Paul Getty's Spartan Aircraft Company right after the war. They were all geared up for airplanes. What do we do? So they got into mobile housing. These trailers right here are hands down the best built shells of a trailer ever made.
Really?
They're incredible. If you look at this thing, it's, again, 1952. And if you sight it, just stand and look down, it doesn't falter at all. It's perfectly straight. They're just incredibly well built. But you can just take a quick gander.
Oh, wow. That is so cool.
So the wonderful thing about this is you would think this is the living room. It's the observation lounge. And that's it.
Of course it is.
That's how they advertised it.
I talked to Craig about this. I said, let's document the whole thing. So if you go to my website, which is terryoreilly.ca, and you scroll down, you'll see the whole process from taking a picture of the Airstream as I found it in Cambridge, Ontario that day, right through there's videos of me bringing it out to Nova Scotia with my wife, Debbie. And we left it with Craig for a year.
That was the first time I had done a recording studio. Now, I had built a recording studio back in the day, but an actual recording studio in a building. So I had a little bit of knowledge about sound and treatment and baffles and insulations and stuff. But a lot of times people, so there's RVing, right? There's people that are going to hook up their trailer and take it out and go traveling. But then there's the backyard cabana, the guest house. It takes as long as it takes. It all depends. You said it. You never know what kind of damage is in there or what it is that you're doing. Are we taking a nice trailer and just updating it and restoring what's there? Or are we taking an Airstream and gutting it and starting from scratch?
Now that you have so many completed projects, are there ones you look back on that really stand out to you as something you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, at night I sit in bed and scroll over past pictures, but no. I did a trailer that has been dubbed the Adirondack Airstream.
So
you got to see that?
it did. We found an article online. It is unbelievable.
Well, that was that one that I mentioned where he just said, you do your thing. I want you to just do your thing. Reach down inside and pull out all those ideas that you've always had and apply it to my trailer. My personal collection is 1930s trailers. So I still have trailers stored in California that they do better in that weather.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so my personal preference is barn fresh, original, a little bit of damage is okay, but 1930s and 40s trailers.
And what is it about those decades?
Just the rich woods that were used and the fabrics and the floorings and just the detail. The detail that went into the manufacturing of each little component that was put into them. That's what I love.
Do you have a sort of bingo card of either models of trailers that you'd really like to do in your career or certain renovations, like you've done a restaurant one, if you've done the recording studio, do you have anything like that in your head?
Picture those old 1930s aluminum and Bakelite Rolodexes. You know, those beautiful, I've got one of those with all of this imagery stuck up there that I have to someday get out.
Wow.
I gotta pull those cards out. And there are a lot of trailers that I have always wanted to do, or, you know, like I've always wanted to do a wheelchair accessible trailer, but in a vintage style. You know, how do you incorporate that? So that's something that I'm looking forward to doing someday.
You know, it's interesting that one of our listeners named this thing. So we used to just say, you know, this show's been recorded in the Airstream mobile recording studio. And then one of our listeners said, no, it's a Tearstream. Terry and Airstream, right? And we just love that. So it became the Tearstream after that. I think it gives this show an interesting quality. I think when people know the show's recorded in an Airstream trailer, and we have a podcast network called Apostrophe, and we have multiple shows. Another show of ours called We Regret to Inform You is also recorded in here. So I just think that it's a part of our show. It's part of our persona, it's part of our graphics, our identity. So it's brought this whole other thing, and all our fans know it's recorded in an Airstream. So when I go out and I meet all our listeners at events, they go, "Tell me about the Airstream." Like they all know. They're on board. They've known it from day one. So it's a big part of our brand. I think we really thought it out. I can't think even offhand what I would change in here. Maybe I would turn my recording desk around so I faced my producer rather than having my back to her in hindsight. But that would probably be the only thing. Everything else we just went over so often that I think we nailed it.
I have no idea where I'm going from here, but I'm just loving it. Just filled with gratitude to be able to step outside and do this on a daily basis. I sew the curtains, I do it all.
Wow, you truly are a jack of all trades.
And you saw Terry's trailer, and I even made a pillow for him that had a print of the cover of one of his books.
Oh, and the pillow, we forgot to mention the pillow with the book.
This was Craig, just as a surprise. Again, he took the cover of one of my books and actually put it on the pillow, which is so great. It's great.
What a personal touch, because
I know.
Like, oh my God, just unreal.
He's so great. I can't say enough about Craig. He is amazing.
There's a lot of constant chaos in this life, which we have chosen. But some days are definitely easier than others. I've noticed that we get a tidbit irritable when we have
Well, it depends how busy the day is.
well, there's lots of factors. How busy the day is, how late it is when we get home, are we home or wherever we're going, getting set up, how wrecked the trailer is by the time we get in it.